Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Reviews with your host, Arlyeon. On today's episode, I'll be talking about a title which I can only describe as possibly one of the oddest point-and-click adventure games I have ever played, namely Jacob Janerka's Paradigm. Find out if this title had me vibing to the fattest of beatsies, or if it left me feeling slothful. In the post-apocalyptic country of Kroish, the idea of being able to manufacture a perfect child would seem a tempting prospect. Why risk leaving anything to your bickering biological progeny when they might be marred by mutations or pursue an arts degree, when you can instead buy one of Dupa Genetics' morally ambiguous prodigy children? Just ignore titular protagonist Paradigm, a not-so-shining example of the program, given his hideous mutations in the talking tumor growing out of his head. Ignore all that. Still, despite the relative isolation his malformations have foisted onto him, he's doing his best to be productive by finishing up his latest EP. At least, once he manages to figure out what to do about the looming threat of nuclear annihilation, or the ominous corporate conspiracy being executed by his literal parent company, Dupa Genetics. And I'm just gonna say here, the thing is, this summary really doesn't do the game justice on a narrative front, if only because I can't distill the weirdness and humor of the situation you actually find yourself in. From the game's introduction to just the gags hidden in the UI, I love the dog tutorial so much, to the quirks of the various characters in the puzzles, I found myself laughing out loud, and also floored by a number of the moments. While some of the moments are definitely slapstick in nature, there's some genuinely great bits of wordplay and puns which make clicking on everything and pursuing all the dialogue options absolutely worth it. Like, the actual layer of punnage involved when he flirts with objects he can't put in his inventory when you try to make him pick it up is great to me. And I'll admit that the game kept me guessing plot-wise throughout the entire experience, if only because of how unpredictable the characters and developments were. I mean, where else can you find an evil corporate overlord that also happens to be a sloth who habitually vomits up candy? Or a beatboxing eggplant? It's wild. And my enjoyment of Paradigm also extends to its gameplay. For one thing, there's some decent quality of life elements implemented, such as allowing players to choose between two difficulty settings, one of which leans towards a more old-school point-and-click experience for those who like clicking wildly around a screen, and one which lets players seek out hints, as well as providing players the means to highlight interactable spots. I'll admit, I'm rather glad I went with the latter, not because I wanted the hints, but because it meant I could find everything I could click on for dialogue and horrible pun purposes. As for the overall difficulty of the puzzles, the game isn't too punishing, as the protagonist tends to drop hints with his own dialogue towards what might need to be done with an object, and whilst there's certainly some funny or odd solutions, they generally made a great deal of sense to me. In fact, the longest I got stumped on a puzzle was a good 15 minutes or so of running around trying to resolve something, and I was at least able to be relatively productive during that time and address a couple other puzzles along the way. Anyways, moving on to the aesthetic level of things, Paradigm's got a lot going for it. The overall art style managed to do a good job of balancing the odd, the grotesque, and the hilarious, and just genuinely looks good. And the game has some moments during dialogue where the portraits just absolutely help to sell a moment. There's a number of moments where the visual style shifts, whether it be for a gag or... okay, basically always for a gag. All the same, it's so well done. Whether it's the brief live action moments, the more retro advertising styles, or other odds and ends. Stylistically, it was sort of an artistic chef kiss for giving the game an intentionally cheesy vibe, and I loved it so much. I have to say much the same about the game's audio to boot. There's some absolutely great music to be found as you roam about the countryside of Kroish, And quite a few times where I found myself simultaneously grinning and rolling my eyes as a track helped to drive a gag home. And the same can be said of the voice acting. I loved listening to the various characters. It's maybe a little odd to have such a diverse range of accents in a relatively desolate post-apocalyptic valley, but at the same time, it's pretty par for the course for the overall vibe of the game. And with that said, that brings me to the conclusion of this video, and honestly, I am so grateful, so grateful that I was nudged into trying this game out by my colleague, Virus. Psst, who you can find as Virus the Mad Bar on Twitter and Twitch. Anyways, bard things aside, it's not often that I find myself laughing out loud throughout a playthrough of a game, but Paradigm honestly surprised me a great deal with its odd but clever sense of humor. And I found it really enjoyable in a gameplay sense as well. Whether it was the creative integration of humor and puzzle solving, the sort of mad genius of incorporating gags into the user interface, or just the really weird Easter eggs you can find, I never found myself bored. And I certainly never found myself frustrated either. Essentially, this game is a critical hit in my book, and if you're looking for something to delve into over the course of a few afternoons, I would thoroughly recommend giving this a try, especially if you're looking for something lighthearted. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And for those interested in more indie reviews, developer interviews, podcasts, or Monday TTRPG content, which should be starting up soon, I promise, I swear, maybe it'll be a little bit slow because of, COVID things. Hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know when there's a new release. There's also a Discord. You can click the link in the banner or the description to become a part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron. And lastly, if you would like to help support the channel, we do have a Ko-fi running now, which will hopefully be eventually replaced by a Patreon to help supplement funds for our lovely editor Rand, and to make sure we can continue to provide quality content. Again, check the description and the banner for them links. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.